What's up, guys? Today we are going to talk about one of the hottest jerkbaits of the last season, and that is this guy, the Megabass Kanata. Now, this has been a super sleeper bait for a really long time that has been just thrusted into the spotlight with Brandon Polnick, a lot of guys using live scope. I mean, it has become a live scope staple now, and today we're going to break down why, some alterations, how to use it, some little tweaks and twists so that you realize that this bait isn't just a big giant floating jerk bait that has no purpose. When you do a few key little twists and tweaks to it, it becomes an amazing bait, and likely if you guys are using forward-facing sonar, it will become one of your favorites. So if you want to deep dive through a super dope, really fun, the largest jerkbait in the Megabass lineup, the Kanata, let's have some fun. Welcome to the Hookup Tackle.
Oh, what a stud.
Yeah. Look at that.
That was sick.
Woo!
Cheers, my friends. Happy Sunday. All right, guys, some breaking news. What's new this week at the Hookup Tackle?
What a beautiful coastline fish.
Look at that.
Look at that gut on that. That's a nice fish.
Welcome back, my friends. I am Ben with the Hookup Tackle, the Tackle Otaku on Instagram, being joined by my buddy CJ Desert Bassin on Instagram.
How we doing?
CJ, what's up?
How's it going, man?
We are talking about giant jerkbaits today.
I love it.
Well, maybe not giant, but big.
It's big.
Right? In fact, let's do a size comparison. Let's stand by.
We're already a minute and a half in the video, and we're already comparing sizes here.
Well, you know, better to be up front, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's familiar with the Ito Vision 110, right? Here is a 110 and a Kanata side by side, so you can see the difference. The 110 obviously is 110 millimeters. It weighs a half ounce. The Kanata is 160 millimeters, 1 ounce. Okay, so we're talking about a very big difference in size here. Now, the Kanata is not a new bait. The Kanata is a bait that's been on the market for many years and really was designed and developed as a high float, large bait that can be, of course, jerked, but also straight retrieve. Now, in Japan, they love fishing their jerk baits on a straight retrieve, almost more like a crankbait.
Yep.
Out here in the US, we love fishing our jerk baits with twitches, right? So this kind of blends the two realms together, if you will, and it allows for a bait that's big in profile, but is equally at home whether you are straight retrieving or twitching. Now, all this is going to be important here in a minute when we start talking about how to implement this, okay? So, at first look, here's a look at the Kanata, okay? So it's a big profile bait. It's long, but you'll notice it's very thin, okay? So it's built in a way to where it's going to have a lot of flashing to it. Okay, so this isn't a bait that's going to have a lot of big side-to-side movement. You're not going to get really big, aggressive, tweaks left and right. It's a bait that's going to have a lot of top to down, a lot of what is referred to as flashing. Now, flashing really seems to be one of those things in certain baits that triggers bigger strikes. Okay, there's tons of options, and sometimes a big fish wants something that's just moving really far left and right or super erratic. But day in and day out, most of the time with a big fish, they're wise to our shit.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if you want a bait that's going to trigger a strike without, tipping them off that, oh, that's definitely not real, right? Because nothing in nature is going like this, right?
Yep.
And you want that bait to really just kind of flash and move, but stay kind of right in front of them without moving too far out to the side. Something that has flashing is going to be key. And you're going to notice that flashing is a topic that we talk about a lot, whether it's in crankbaits, in jerkbaits, in topwaters even, right? So it may be something that is better than what you're using, it may be something that's not better. It's just a tool,
Yep.
right? So it's just another way to look at it. But what you would normally use a Kanata for out of the box, and this is a high float, right? So you can take this, and this is something that would be great over like aquatic vegetation, weed beds, shallow cover. It's something that I can kind of crank down. I can give it a couple hard pops, and I'm going to get those, you know, weights to kind of activate, and they're going to hear it, and it's going to kind of have a small erratic movement. It's not going to be a big kick. It's going to stay in the small little kind of box window. It might pop up. It might just have a little bit of that. It might just kind of do a little, you know, kick to the side, but it's going to stay in the zone. There are 3 weights that transfer to the back, so it throws incredibly well, even though it's a long flat bait that typically would be something that might catch in the wind. This one doesn't because it has all those weights to it, and when you pop it, it's going to sit very level. Now out of the box, it's going to get to depth, and then you pause, it's almost like a cork, right? It's pretty high flows, right? No matter what you're using for line. Okay, now before we get to some of these tweaks, how to fish it, how to implement, I want to talk through a few colors. Now, there's a bunch of colors in this thing. A lot of you guys are going to be familiar with the Megabass Color Run. A lot of the same colors are in there. I'm holding up MB Gizzard because this seems to be a color that's getting a lot of press and a lot of play right now throughout, you know, Bassmaster, and this is a color that a lot of guys are implementing, and it's a gizzard shed. So it makes sense that it would be a live scope color. Let's just put it over here and hope I don't sit back.
Playing a dangerous game there.
Maybe. Stay.
Nice.
Okay, perfect. It's going to be, you know, your normal key colors that are going to seem obvious are going to be MB Gizzard, Matte Shad, of course, right? And Kamehameha Ghost Pearl. Okay, those are going to be the 3 that you're going to see spoken about most often. Kamehameha Ghost Pearl is another one that's super dope that is transparent. So it looks bluish pearl, but when the light goes on the other side, it's transparent and almost looks like a faint chartreuse, if you will, right? So a super, super cool color. But I also wanted to talk to you guys about some of the shinier colors, because in the Kanata, you have enough of a bait now to where some of these colors are going to be really applicable. When they make some of these colors in smaller baits, like a 110 Junior, for instance, the bait's so small that some of what we're going to talk about isn't really that big of a deal, right? Because the bait's so tiny, oh, whoop-de-doo, it's transparent. But when you're talking about a 160 millimeter bait, some of this can make a big difference, right? So this one is MG Sexy Skeleton. Okay, this is a color that you're going to find throughout the 110 line. But you'll notice that, you know, at first glance, it's kind of just a kind of a shiny, sexy shad, right? But this is one of those colors that when you get light to it, it's fully transparent. Like when I hold this to light, totally clear, right? So it's a super dope color that you can utilize that has flash, but is still natural, right? And that seems to be the key with a lot of what we're doing now with the forward-facing sonars. You need to draw their attention, right? You need to get it to them, you need to get their attention, but then it needs to still be relatively realistic so it doesn't freak them out, right? So MG Sexy Skeleton is a great one. MG Western Clown is another one, you know, and clown colors get overlooked a lot. And I'm not a huge fan of traditional, like, pearl type clown colors. A lot of guys are, and a lot of you guys live in a place where that's just like a no-brainer. Like when we hung out with Toshi, he's like, that's my favorite color.
Yeah, he loves clown.
Yeah, I can't even catch him on the stupid thing. But this is a really cool one because it's that same kind of shiny, but totally clear. I don't know if you can see how clear it is from that side, but if I was to hold light behind this, it's literally just straight clear.
Just you panning it around, you can see how much flash is coming off of the bait.
Yeah,
yeah, just
but
like
only
that.
on your side.
Yep.
So on my side, it's totally transparent, right? Now, these are things that you guys can keep in mind based on your angle. In a lot of what we talk about in live scope, I don't want to make this necessarily a live scope episode, but your angles are going to be critically important on this, right? So if you see a fish here, it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, this is my cast. Like you have to think through some angles. Like what is it chilling on? Is it chilling on a bush? Is it chilling on whatever? But thinking of where the light is also something that's going to affect your angle. So as you guys can see, if the light's shining at the bait, you're seeing a lot of flash, right? But if the light's behind the bait, I'm just seeing a super transparent, natural thing. Right? So you can have one bait that's going to have two completely different effects on fish based on where the sun is in relation to your cast. Okay, and this is going to go for live scope fishing or non-live scope fishing.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so keep that in mind too. All right, so let's go through and talk about some alterations in how we can implement this into our arsenal. Now, even if a lot of you guys aren't using forward sonar, you may be fishing from, maybe you're fishing from shore.
Yeah.
Maybe you're fishing in a river system. Maybe you're just old school and you're just, you're fighting it, right? So a lot of these techniques can be used for you guys just to expand the versatility of the Kanata. Again, out of the package, a Kanata is going to be great from like surface down to maybe like 4 or 5 feet. But once you pause it, it's just going to float real high. So it's a good one to fish right out of the package if you want, shallow water control depth. But if we're trying to get this bait down a little bit deeper and either get it to suspend or slow sink, some of these tips will help you out. And we're going to talk about line and rods and all that too to make sure you guys are comfortable with it as well. Okay. All right. So let's talk about a couple little tweaks. Now, the easiest thing to do anytime you need to make a floating bait suspend or a floating bait sink is to add weight.
Yep.
Okay. So let's do this. I'm already making a mess. Let's do this. Okay. A couple different ways you can approach this. And I'm going to talk about a few different riggings to just give you guys a starting point. And really, this is all about what you want out of the bait and what you're finding you're having success with. You might find one of our riggings, like you do it, and it's like, that was it, right? And I think you will. But you might find that you want to have a little more action, a little less action, sink a little bit more, sink not as much. So all this is stuff that you can alter to your own liking, okay? So we're going to talk about 2 different ways to weight this. Now, the traditional way would be to just grab a weight strip, okay? One of the newer ways is to use an actual weight. Now, these are outer weights from Nishine Lure Works. You could also use like a little clip-on, like grenade weight,
Yep.
right? Where you just kind of clip it on and you don't have to put it into the split ring. So there's different ways of doing it. The reason why I like the Nishine is because it's a soft lead, so you can cut it. So if you use the grenade, you clip it on there and you're kind of stuck with whatever it is. If it's too much weight, you got to unclip it. And they're not always the easiest thing to unclip when you have 3 treble hooks on the bait, right?
Yeah.
So I like to use these because once I get them on the split ring, if I need it to be less, I can literally just cut it with my scissors and I'm good, right? So it's easy. Let's talk about how I'm using these, and then we'll talk about some other alterations as well. So I brought a couple different baits. Now, let's talk about strips, okay? If you are going to use the weight strips, okay, and that's these guys, 2 gram is going to make your Kanata suspend, okay? So keep that number in mind. So you can take a floating Kanata straight out of the box. You could slap a 2 gram weight right in the middle, okay, right there, and you have a suspending bait, okay? Now, what I like to do is if I want it to suspend, I take 2 1 gram strips instead of 1 2 gram strip, okay? Because I like the movement that I get when I split my strips, okay? It balances it more across the body. So instead of just slapping a 2 gram here, I put a 1 gram here, and then I split another 1 gram around that hook hanger. For me, this is the ideal way if I'm trying to get it to suspend. Now, if it's suspending, this is going to be something that you can get down probably realistically 5 to 10 foot. Okay, so still kind of shallow, right? But if you guys are scanning, a shallow flat, or you're just trying to get it down deeper, what's nice about this is that it will be a true suspend for you. Now, keep in mind, water temp, line size, all these are going to have a factor, right? So if you're using a little bit thicker line, it may rise just a touch or sink just a touch depending on what line you're using, okay?
Yep.
Now, you can certainly play with this. You can put the weight on the front side. You can put it on the back side, right? So you can put the weight in different places. If you want it to fast sink or actually sink, then you're going to want to go to 3 gram or 4 gram, okay? So if I wanted to take this bait, for instance, and have it sink down into 15 or 20 feet, I would probably go to 4 gram, right? Because it'll get down there quicker. So I would do a 2 gram here, and then I would split my 2 gram here and here, right? So I'd have 2 grams on front, 2 grams in the middle, 4 grams. And that will turn your Kanata into a bait that will sink slowly. So if you see a fish that's sitting in, 20 feet, I can throw it out there and I can get the bait down. Okay. Where I really love the Kanata though is when you dial it in to suspend.
Yep.
Because it's amazing suspend, and you guys will see in the water what this does. Okay, so that's number one, would be the weight strips. Now the second way to do it would be to add these tuning weights to it, or using like a grenade weight. Okay, so you can see that the tuning weight I attach to the split ring. Okay, so instead of sticking anything on the bait itself, the weight actually goes straight on to the split ring. Okay, now if you want it to suspend, one strip on the front split ring is a perfect suspend. It's super easy, right? Add one little tuning weight, it's suspending. If you want it to sink, add a second one to the middle, and it's going to be a slow sink. If you want it to sink fast, you can add a third one here, or you can add two to the front. Okay, I like two to the front, one in the middle. Okay, I don't like to put anything on the back of my bait, because if you pull this bait too far back, remember there's 3 weights in there. Okay, so if you get too much weight in the back and one of those weights goes, then your bait's just like doing this weird like up and down stuff.
Yep.
I want my bait to stay like this, because this is the key to this bait. The key to this bait is this. Okay, so I want it to stay as horizontal as possible. Okay, so I would do 1 weight, or 2 weights, or 3 weights. Okay, that's how I would do it on this. Now, the reason to use these weights instead of the little strips is because that weight is on the hook. As you're pulling it, it's going to cause that hook to move, and it's going to cause the bait to have a little bit more pivot. So you're going to see that you're going to have a little bit different action out of the bait with the outer tuning weight than you're going to have with just the strip. Now, if you're doing more of a steady retrieve and you want that bait to have a little bit more of a rocking, I would do the tuning weight. Okay? If they're eating it on more of a pause, like you got to kind of get it to them, then pause it and chill it, I would do the weight strips. Okay? Because the weight strips, what we'll do is the weight strip on the pause, it will give it a little shimmy. So you'll see it'll be cranking through, it'll be swimming through, and then you pause it, and the bait just kind of has that quick little shimmy. Like it literally stops, boop, stop, and then it kind of does this little shimmy. And that shimmy is just so sexy, right? With the tuning weight, you're going to be cranking it, and it's just going to be a little bit more erratic of a movement, and when you pause it, it just kind of stops. It doesn't have that same little shimmy. So more of a steady retrieve on this one, okay? Now, let's talk about a few other tweaks.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I agree with that. It's great.
Good. All right, here's another little tip. Now, I like these Nishine blades just because they're easy and they're already rigged for me. Now, you can use any blade you want to use. You want to use just whatever willow leaf or Colorado you have in your boat. You could take them off a spinnerbait. You could get like an owner, flashy accent. Knock yourself out. Do whatever you want.
Want to hear a funny story about that?
Sure.
So one time when I was doing this exact thing that we're talking about, I actually took a blade off of a B9.
Yep.
That weird kind of shape that it has, and I put it on there. Just funny. It made me think about it.
Yeah, I mean, use whatever you have, right? Or whatever you want to use. And a lot of times, using something like that with a weird shape, like so many times I feel like I go down certain rabbit holes and I get so specific on like the dumbest thing, but in my head, that's the difference maker.
Yeah.
So try to find your own difference maker.
Yeah.
Who knows what it can be?
Just finding confidence.
Now, if you want to mess with these Nishine blade sets, what's cool is they come with 3 blades in 3 different colors. So there's like this matte nickel, there's like a matte gunmetal, and there's like a copper. Okay, so you can match the blade to whatever you want to do. It comes with a split ring, it comes with a ball bearing swivel, and it comes with another split ring. Okay, now the way we use this is we will take off the middle hook. Okay, and we will add that blade right to the middle. Now, what this will do is this will, on the straight retrieve, this blade is back there spinning. Okay, and it's also creating a little different sound, a little bit more noise on a straight retrieve. So as this is flashing, that blade is spinning and it's clacking. Okay, when you pause it, it has, instead of the bait having this little shimmy, the blade has a little shimmy, and it kind of falls, then you move it again and the blade has a little shimmy. It's just different, right? So you'll see it in the water, it's giving you, you know, the bait is drawing the presence, right? I mean, it's the draw power. It's a big bait. It's in the zone. It's right there. And all of a sudden, there's this small little thing that's just kind of flashy and like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm going to eat it, right? It's just another trigger thing, okay? Now, if you use the blade, 1 gram is enough to suspend it, okay? Because the blade's going to add a little bit of weight because we took the hook off. We added a swivel. We added a blade. And then we can just add 1 gram up in front. You can split it on the hook hanger or put it in front and it'll balance the weight of this towards the back, okay? If you want it to sink, you're gonna do 2 gram. And if you do the 2 gram, I would definitely split it from that hook hanger so that it keeps it at a horizontal drop, okay? So this is a really cool, fun way to do it. I think if you guys implement it, this is a perfect jerkbait to do it on because it's long. All right, if you tried to do this with like a 110 Junior, you just had kind of a mess on your hands. There's not enough bait. The blade's just going to kind of get in the way. But this is a big bait, so it's a perfect bait to do it on. It's a really cool way to do it. Now, another tip. If the fish are just absolutely smoking your bait, right, then I prefer 2 hooks. Okay, I'd rather have 2 hooks. Now, you could also do a 1 gram here and upsize these 2 hooks. Okay, so what comes on there is like a size 3 or 2, depending on what hook you're in. So you could go just a little heavier gauge 2, or even go to a 1, and it still won't wrap on anything. Okay, and that'll add a bigger hook and a little bit more weight. But if they're absolutely smoking this thing and they're eating it from, you know, headshotting it, I want the biggest hook I have that can get in the mouth that won't affect the action, so that my hook set is solid and I have the most hook possible, right? Now, more often than not, with a jerkbait, they're usually just kind of lazy or they're slapping at it, right? And a lot of times we're scoping these fish, they're next to a bush, they're in a grass, they're not really just aggressively chasing. That's why nobody's really catching them. But all of a sudden you scan like, oh shit, there's been a fish there this whole time I've been casting, right? And you dial it in. A lot of times you just kind of swipe at it, or it's more of a half-ass, right? So anytime you have 3 hooks, the danger, especially with bigger hooks and a heavier bait and generally heavier line, is that a lot of times when they suck it in, these hooks get in the way and they get hooked on the outside of the mouth, on the top of the head, on the side of the face, in weird places, right? And because you have a heavier rod, a heavier line, all this power, a lot of times it's just easy for it to rip out. So this is actually a trick that I borrowed from Jeff years ago with his swim baits. And what I'll do is I'll double split ring and I'll downsize my hooks. Okay, so instead of upsizing the hook to get it to sink, I'll actually go to a size 4. So I'll downsize a full size on here, but I'll go to a double split ring. So I add a split ring to each one, and then I downsize my hook. Now what that does is the smaller hooks will penetrate easier, okay? The reason I add that extra split ring is because if it gets hooked in a weird spot, it allows the fish to kind of have a full pivot. As they're shaking and my line's going, the bait now can almost pivot all the way around in a 360. When you only have 1 split ring on there, it gets to a point where it can't go anymore. And this is a big bait. So if they half-ass it at the back and you hook them on this one little hook and you're pulling this way and they're pulling this way, right? This allows you to basically have full pivot before it pops that hook out. So you're going to land more fish, you're going to get a better land ratio, you're going to hook more fish on the smaller hook. So this is definitely a tweak I would do. Now, this one we added a feather to the front. You can play with this, right? So I would just play with it, right? This is just an owner, tournament feathered treble hook. You could do a Gamakatsu, you could do a Rico, you could do a Ryugi, whatever you like. Sometimes adding a feather gives them a target. Right? It on the paws, especially when that bait's sitting there kind of shimmying, that feather just kind of breathes and drops, and it's just a target for them that they can kind of see, and they're like, I'm going to eat that right there. And we've positioned it at the front so that when they eat it, we're trying to get them to headshot it, ideally, right? We want them to eat it here because this is going to be our best land ratio versus back here, okay? So something that you guys can try. So there you go. Try that. I think if you implement these little tweaks, you're going to find that this bait has a ton of versatility. Now, as far as the retrieves and what we're doing, you're going to vary from steady retrieve to pops to super aggressive. This is one of those baits where you could literally just be super aggressive with and just pop, 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 pop. It's just going to flash, 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 flash. It's just going to keep moving, right? You can mix in some just straight retrieves. It's just going to have a steady movement and then pop it every once in a while. It's just going to flash over and then steady retrieve. So play with it, right? Vary it up. What I would recommend online is I would recommend jumping to like you're going to probably live somewhere between 12 and 20 on this, okay? So 14 or 16 is really ideal for me. 16 probably would be the main size unless you're trying to get down deep. So if you're trying to get it like deeper than 10 foot, then drop to 14 or even 12 if you want. But remember, this is a big bait. It's a 1 ounce bait. You're going to probably be grinding it a little bit. So I like the idea of being able to get a little bit heavier line on it, 14, 16, because your rod is also going to be more powerful, right? Yeah. So this isn't a bait that you can just tie onto your normal jerkbait rod. If you guys are throwing like a 110 stick, a jerkbait special, something like that, never going to work,
You'd be
right?
The bait.
Yeah, you're gonna break the rod, or even if you kind of lob it out there, the rod's not going to be snappy enough to really get the bait to respond, right? It's just everything's going to be soggy. So traditionally, again, this isn't a new bait on the market, right? So this is a bait that's been out for several years. So Megabass has recommended, basically, since this bait's been on the market, the rod that they recommend to throw the Kanata on is the Orochi XX Diablo Spec-R. This has been the rod they've recommended. Now, this is a rod that's rated 3/8 to 3/4, even though it's a 1 ounce bait. It's a little bit more powerful of a rod. It's still slightly parabolic, right? It's still kind of designed as a reaction rod, but it's a much more powerful rod than like a jerkbait special. Even though the jerkbait special is rated kind of the same to 3/4, this gives you a lot more power. So when you're pulling and you're sweeping, the rod isn't just a soggy noodle. It's actually snappy. You get some response out of it. You can do some really cool things with it. Now, some other options, right? You guys hear me talk about the Mad Bull all the time. This is one of my favorites. This is usually the rod that goes on at 3/8 to 1 ounce here. You're at 7 foot instead of 7.2, so I've given up a couple inches, but it's just a really snappy rod. It's crazy sensitive. So even if a fish way out there and I'm watching my thing, I can feel it, right? So, I mean, you can feel everything with the Mad Bull. So I really dig the Mad Bull. Another one that's really good in the Megabass lineup is the Tequila Backdrop. So the Tequila Backdrop is a rod that's rated actually up to 4 ounce, but it's got a very similar taper to the Mad Bull. Very, very close, right? Yeah. So it's a stouter rod. It's more powerful, but you can, if you're doing a lot of hard jerks with the Kanata, something like this is going to save your arm because it's got a ton of power that can really respond well. Another rod that's great that we throw it on is the 7.2 Heavy Steez. Okay, so this is another one that's really, really good. You can use the moving bait special as well. We were kind of talking about that earlier. It handles it, but it's a little bit soggy at the tip. So if all you're doing is chucking and kind of straight winding, you could use that rod. But I think for practical purposes, to be able to do as much as you can with that bait, 7.2 Heavy is going to be better. And don't be afraid of it saying heavy. Like, this is a rod that we use a lot for reaction stuff because it bends a surprising amount through the rod. Okay, so it's a really cool stick for it, and it's rated for 1.5 ounces. So throwing 1 ounce is kind of right in its wheelhouse. Okay. Now, gear ratio, same as whatever you guys are throwing on your regular jerkbait. 7-to-1 is kind of probably perfect because that'll give you that good blend of kind of being able to wind and being able to jerk and pause. But whatever you guys prefer is good. I would just stick with something that's kind of solid. Okay, because it is a 1 ounce bait. So heaving a 1 ounce bait over and over and over again on a reel that's not built for it. Like, if you were going to do this on like a Tatula SVT wing or a regular Corrado or something like that, sooner or later you're just going to blow up the reel. Like, they're not built for that, right? So get something that's either HD or get something that's like solid aluminum that's built to handle, like, it's not going to flex at all. So all your gears are going to kind of just be, they're gonna be held together, right? They can handle all that pressure, right?
Yep.
So I find like a Zillion's great, an HD is great, you know, Crawler 200's great. Something that's just got a little bit extra, you know, I don't know. It's just put together different.
Yeah, you're almost throwing a swim bait, you know?
Basically.
You're about there.
Yeah. So same rules apply there.
Yep.
Okay, as far as retrieves go, I know we kind of talked about it already. Basically, you're just going to kind of implement either a straight retrieve, a twitch retrieve, or a hybrid of the two. Okay, so use the weights to control the depth, right? And use your sonar or, you know, intuition, right? To tell you what depth you want it to go in, right? So I would recommend the first few times you cast it, just do a straight retrieve and get used to where it dives, how it dives, and then, you know, maybe just wind it down to depth and then just start implementing some pops. You can wind it fast, you can wind it slow, give it a few pops, let it suspend. So remember, if you get it close to cover, let's say if this is a tree and a fish is chilling here and you can see that it's like really stuck to cover, the magic of the Kanata is that pause. Okay, so it's going to swim great. They're going to hear it coming, but when it pauses and it has that little bit of a shimmy, it's just money. So get it close to the fish, maybe just give it a hard hit and just let it, you know, flash, and then it'll continue to flash. And hard hit, let it flash, and it'll continue to flash. Hard hit, it'll flash, and it'll continue to wobble. And that movement on the pause is absolutely the key.
Secondary movement's key.
Yeah.
It's key.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for people to start using this. I think LiveScope has really exploded this bait. And I think the problem with it earlier was a lot of people are afraid to throw it because it's so big.
Yeah.
But I think now with LiveScope, people are throwing bigger baits and they're seeing there's a lot more fish following it. They're getting more reactions out of these bigger baits than they knew they were before. And that instills a lot of confidence, you know?
For sure. And, you know, getting back to what you said earlier about it kind of being a swim bait.
Yeah.
If you guys have a rod that you're currently throwing like a 6-inch mag draft on, that's perfect for the Kanata.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to recreate this whole system. It's not like, oh, I gotta go buy a Kanata rod. Like, use the one you're throwing the mag draft on. So if you're throwing on a perfect pitch, if you're throwing it on, you know, 7.2 heavy, if you're throwing it on the BMG, something like that, all of those will work for the Kanata.
Yep.
Right? So will the rods that we just talked about. Right? So this will give you guys a starting point. It can just be intimidating sometimes when you're like, holy shit, a 1-ounce jerkbait, because that's all that's in our head is that we're going to be fishing this thing like we are a 110. But remember, this is actually a really easy bait to jerk all day because it doesn't have a lot of water resistance, because it's not like you're pushing water and you're having to push it out to the side. As you pop it, it's literally just flashing. So it's just kind of moving through. So it's easy to use, and that hybrid system of being able to kind of wind it and twitch it at the same time really gives you a different look. So I think if you guys try it, you're going to find that it will, I don't know that it's going to become a staple year-round for you guys, but when those fish are keyed in on bigger bait, I mean, if they're eating full-size perch, if they're eating full-size bluegill, if they're eating grown threadfin, herring, gizzard shad, you know, if they're eating bigger stuff, throwing smaller jerkbaits isn't usually the right idea, right? Sometimes you just have to throw something bigger. This gives you another option to just kind of upsize everything, and it's clearly, you know, I mean, guys are just absolutely crushing on it, right? As you guys can follow along. So, you know, give it a shot, guys. I think it might be a cool tool to add to the arsenal. But if you guys have any questions on it, drop it down below and I will get answers to you. If you have a question on the rigging or, you know, the hooks or any of the rods, maybe you guys have discovered your own way of rigging it. And if you want to share, if it's not like super secret, drop that down below too, because I'd like everybody to collectively learn as much as we can from each other so we can all catch as many fish as possible. So until next time, guys, on behalf of myself and CJ and everybody here at the Hookup Tackle, thank you for giving us the time. Thank you for deep diving through the Kanata rabbit hole. I think it's worth it. I think you guys will have a lot of fun with that bait if you implement it. We will see you again on the next video. Thank you guys for your business, and see you soon. Peace.
See you guys.